Welcome everyone to the pre-algebra course. This first lecture is on Module 1, Section 1.1, which is an introduction to whole numbers. So we'll begin by talking about whole numbers. Okay, so actually let me first start by defining whole numbers. And before I do that, let's go one step before that and define natural numbers first. So natural numbers are simply what we think of as the counting numbers. So natural numbers are our counting numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And I'll do ... to mean it goes on forever, right, to infinity. So you can think of these as like the counting numbers. So what the whole numbers are basically all of the natural numbers, and they also include 0. Okay, so when we talk about whole numbers, we have all the natural numbers and 0. And again, they go on forever, right, to infinity, right? So I'll just say it includes 0 as well. So in this section, in fact, this entire chapter, we're going to work with the whole numbers. We'll talk about adding and subtracting whole numbers, multiplying and dividing them. So we'll work in particular just with the whole numbers. So let me start by looking at our base 10 system, which involves whole numbers. So this is what's called a place value chart. And this is really for base 10, which is what you guys are most familiar with. Some people call this the decimal system as well. So I'm going to write out a very large number, and we'll kind of break it up into pieces. So here's the number. So one thing I can do is I can split this into groups of 3. So actually I start at the right-hand side, and I'm going to break this up into groups of 3. So after the 0, then after the 2. And these groups are also called the periods. So all these groups of 3 are called periods. And the first one, so again, starting on the right-hand side, this is the ones period. Then the second one is the thousands. And then the millions. And then the billions. And we'll do one more, trillions. And so on. And there are some names for the larger ones. I'd have to look them up myself. We don't tend to use those, right? So if we go through, billions and trillions, that'll be fine. And then within each of those periods or each of those groups, this is the ones, right, position. Then we have the tens, and then the hundreds. And then again, this in the thousands, right? This again will be the ones, like this represents a 1,000, then tens, and then hundreds. And then, just to save time, I'll write it as O for ones, T for tens, H for hundreds. Then O, T, H, O, T, H, and so on. Okay, so within each period, each group, I have ones, tens, hundreds. So let me ask you, a basic question, right? Let's start with an easy example here. Let's say we want to identify the place that the digit 3 occupies. So if I'll write out a few numbers. Let's say 231, 43,020, 300,002, 998, and then 803. So if I look at each of those numbers, I just want to identify the place that the digit 3 occupies. So in this first number, right, the 3 is right here. What place is it in? Well, it's in the tens, right? First of all, it's in the ones period or ones group, and within that group, it's in the tens position, right? So this represents 3 tens. In the second number here, second example, the 3 is right here. Well, what is that position? If we come over to our big table here, it's this one, right? So it's basically the thousands, right? Usually you don't even have to say the 1,000. You can just say thousands and that will be fine. So this represents 3 thousands. Let me do this in. So 3 thousands. In the third number, the 3 is right here. So again, what does that represent? Well, it's going to be in the hundred thousands position, right? So this value would be 300 thousands. And then finally, in the last number, here's the 3. Where is it? Well, it's right in the first slot there, all the way to the right. So that's the ones, right, place. So this would represent 3 ones. Okay, the other thing to recognize here, and this is really important, is that each of these places is off by a factor of 10, right? It increases by a factor of 10. So the ones place, I can write this position as 10 to the 0 power. Why? Because it turns out anything to the 0 power is equal to 1. So 10 to the 0 power is just equal to 1. The tens place I can write as 10 to the 1 power. Why? Because 10 to the 1 power is equal to 10. When you have a 1 in the exponent, it just remains the same number, right? You don't have to do anything to it. The hundredths place is equivalent to 10 to the second power. So the exponent is a 2. So if I do 10 squared, well, that's 10 times 10. We will review exponents more carefully later. So that's just 100, right? So that's the hundredths place. And you can kind of guess. See how the exponent is increasing by 1 here? So the 1,000ths position is going to be 10 cubed, right? So 10 cubed would be 10 times 10 times 10, which is 1,000. Then this will be 10 to the 4th. That would be the 10,000ths position. The 100,000ths would be 10 to the 5th. And notice here, I'm just increasing the exponent. 10 to the 7th, 10 to the 8th, and so on, dot, dot, dot. Okay, so that's important. It's really a base 10 system. That's why we call it a base 10 system. Each position there is another multiple of 10. All right, the second thing I want to talk about, and again, I think in this first section, a lot of this will be review, but it's good to make sure that everyone is exactly on the same page because everything builds, right? So you have to know the basics and everything builds kind of on the basics. So let's talk a little bit about word names. Let's say I want to write 87 in words. So how do we do that? Well, it's almost obvious, right? So 87, I would simply write as 80 dash and then 7. Okay, let's do something a little harder. Let's say I want to write this in words. So here's my number. This is called standard form. So 528,050. I'm going to write that in words. So the way that you do this is you look at the first group there, the first period, and you write the number within that period, right, which is 528. So I start by writing 528. And then I have to give the period name, right, which is thousands. Comma, and then I write the number that's in the ones group, and you don't have to write 1 or anything. You can just write the number, which in this case is just 50. So this would be 50. So that would be it, right? 528,050. Let's do another one. Let's say I want to write this number in words. Okay, so I start with this first group, and I write the number within that group or within that period. It's 421, right? So 421. And in what period is it in? It's millions, right? So I would write million. I don't have anything in the thousands group or thousands period, right? So 0 thousands, you don't need to write that. And then finally in the ones group, I have 132. Okay, and the one thing I want to be careful is, notice I didn't write and, because some people, I know when you say it, and sometimes I do this myself, you want to say 132. You don't want to write the and. So let me write that in particular. So no, there's no and here. The and's going to come up later when we talk about decimal numbers. The and represents the decimal itself. Okay, so in this case, it's simply 421,132. That was it. That's the number. All right, so that's word names. Another thing that you might be asked to do is to write a number that's in standard form into what's called expanded form. So let me review that. So expanded form. So, for example, let's say I want to write 6,321 in expanded form. So this number right now, the way it's written there, is the standard form, right? So this is standard form. And I want to write it in expanded form. To write a number in expanded form, all you're doing is you're writing each digit with its place value. Okay, so this, you could write this as 6, and in what position it's in, what place is it in? Thousands, right? So 6,000 plus 3 hundreds plus 2 that's in the tens, right? So 2 tens plus 1 1. Right, so really this means 6,000 plus 300 plus 2 tens, the same as 20, plus 1 1, which is 1. And that ends up giving you 6,321. So expanded form, you're simply writing each digit with its place. Okay, let's do a few more of these. Let me go to another page here. Let's say I want to write this number in expanded form. Okay, so I start with the 7. That's millions, right? So 7 millions plus, what is the digit 2? Well, that position is hundred thousands, so plus 200,000s. Plus 5 10,000s. Plus 1,000. Plus 300s. Plus 8 tens. Plus 0 ones. Okay, so that would be the number written in expanded form. And of course, we could always go the other way, right? So if I have, let's say I give you a number in expanded form, and I want to write it in standard form. Okay, so let's say I give you, write 400s plus 5 tens plus 2 ones in standard form. Then of course this is simply going to be 452, right? 400s plus 5 tens plus 2 ones. And then we could do the same thing with word names too, right? I could give you a word name and ask you to write it in standard form. So let's do one more example here. Let's say I want to write in standard form. And this is the word name, 30 million. $500,000. Oops, let me do that again. Uh, 484. So if I write this out in standard form, right, it would be 30, the period is millions, right, so comma, that's the first one. 500,000 would just be that, and then 484. So that would be the number in standard form. Okay, let's finish up this section by doing, let me just pick a couple of questions from your homework from My Open Math. They're going to be slightly different values than you have, because the values are sort of randomized when you do your homework, but this will give you sort of an idea of how to do these homework questions. So this question says, consider the number 925, 703, 861. So you could read that as 925,703,861. Type in the place value for the given digit in the whole number above. Be sure to put an S at the end of the place value. Okay, so the 9. Well, what position is the 9 in? Well, if you look up here, right, the 9's right there. First of all, it's in the period of millions, right? And it's 100, so it must be 100 millions. Okay, so 100 millions. What about the 1? Well, the 1 is here. That's in the ones period, and it's actually in the 1 spot, so that's just ones. And then the 2, it looks like the 2 is, where is it? Right here. So that's in the millions period, and it's in the tens spot, right? So it would be 10 millions. Okay, so in that question, they just wanted us to pick out, to type in the actual place value for each of those digits. Okay, this question says the number, so they give you the number, right? 2,395,634,415 is between what two numbers in the hundreds? So we have to look at, first of all, what digit is in the hundreds place? That's the 4 here, right? So we want the smaller number in the hundreds and then the larger number in the hundreds. So what number is it between? Well, you can think of this as rounding it or either going below and above, right? So in this case, the number below that in the hundreds is going to be 2,395,634,400, right? That will be below 415. And then the number in the hundreds that's above it, that's got to be 500, right? So everything else will be the same, except this will be 500. So that's what I mean, like trap it within the hundreds, right? The number below and the number above. That number is in between those two. Okay, let's look at this question. It says, identify the numbers labeled with the letters A, B, and C on the scale below. Okay, so they give us two numbers, right? They give us 5,000 right here and 5,100 right there. And notice that it's divided in between 5,000 and 5,100. It's divided into 4, right, sections. So each of those must be, well, we can think about this, right? The distance from 5,000 to 5,100 is going to be 100. And then if I divide by 4, that's going to be 25, right? So the A here, let me do each of these. This is going to be 5,000 plus 25, right? So that'd be 5,025. The A here is going to be 5,000 plus 50, right? Because I have two 25s. So this is going to be 5,050. So that's the A, 5,050. The B, well, again, these are all, each of those intervals represents 25. So this looks like it's 3 above, right? So you start at 5,100, I add 25, add 50, add 75. So it looks like that's going to be 5,100 plus 75. So 5,175. And then the C here is going to be basically 75 below, right? So to get to this position, I would have to subtract 25, subtract 50, subtract 75. Okay, I know we haven't actually reviewed addition and subtraction yet, but We will do that soon. Hopefully you'll have no problem with this. If you do, don't worry about it. We will review addition and subtraction soon. So I would need to subtract 75. So, and that's going to be 4,925. Okay, the other way to think about it is if this is 4,925, if I add another 25, this position would be 4,950, 4,975, and then 4,000 plus another 1,000, which is 5,000. Okay, so the thing is to figure out what each division represent, which each of those tick marks represent, and then you can figure out exactly what those numbers are. In this case, they want to know A, B, and C. Okay, let me do one last thing on rounding. So 2 more questions, and that'll finish us off. That should give you a good start on the homework on this section. So let's say we want to round, this is question 17, round 91,122 to the nearest 1,000. So first of all, what digit is in the thousands? Let's underline it. It's this first 1 here. So I look to the right of that 1, and I see another 1 that's less than 5. So the 1 that I underlined is going to stay a 1, and then the rest becomes zeros, right? So this will be 91000. So 91,000 would be the nearest 1,000. Okay, what about question 18? Round 4,991 to nearest 1,000. Okay, so again, I underline the thousands, which is the 4. I look to the right, it's a 9, which is 5 or greater. So that 4 becomes a 5. I have to add 1 to it, and then everything else becomes zeros. So 5,000 would be the nearest 1,000. Now I want to round it to the nearest 100. So in the hundredths place is the 9 here. So I look to the right, it's 9. So that's 5 or greater. So that 9 has to add 1 to it, has to become a 10, but I can't put a 10 there. I can put a 0 there, and the 1 has to go in the thousands place. So you carry it to thousands place. So this is also going to be 5,000. Great. So that's it for section 1.1.